All right, welcome to RealGM Radio. This is our Pacific Division preview. Finally getting to this. It's the final installment to my division preview series here. And it took a while to get to this point. We had to wait for a resolution to the Jonathan Kaminga thing. We had to wait for the Warriors to fill out their roster, but it was well worth it because this is an awesome preview. I'm first joined by Andy Kamenetzky, who hosts Locked On Lakers, also works for ESPN LA. And then I'm going to be joined by Bram Hillsman, who hosts the popular Warriors Huddle podcast for the Warriors fan perspective on all of this kind of stuff. So Andy comes on first, and we go through the entire Pacific Division, team by team, who got better, who got worse, most interesting players, interesting rookies, interesting additions. We get into Luka and LeBron and everything about the Lakers. We get into everything going on with the Clippers and how all of this will affect the product on the court. And at the end, we make some predictions about how the division will finish and how many teams in the division will make the playoffs. And then finally, we end with a little bit of talk about Steve Kerr, sneaky coaching free agent coming up here, and what that means for him in the Warriors' future. We talk about that, and then Bram joins me to get the Warriors fan perspective on all of that. So really excited for this episode. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's jump in. All right, Andy Kamenetzky from ESPN LA and Locked On Lakers is here to help me preview the Pacific Division. Just a reminder for the audience, we're going to review each team's offseason, talk about who got better, who got worse. We're going to highlight some individual players, and then we're going to make some predictions at the end of the show. Andy, you and I have been talking a long time about doing this Pacific Division preview. We've had to wait a little while because we had to wait for the Warriors to finish their offseason, for the Jonathan Kaminga stuff all to happen. I'm going to cover the Warriors stuff more in depth with Bram Hillsman from the Warriors Huddle podcast a little bit later on in the show, but I wanted to get your thoughts first on the Kaminga Warriors stuff and how surprised you were by how all this played out.
I'm not surprised in a lot of ways that it played out this way, just because Kaminga and the Warriors have been a mess for a few years. So the idea that this offseason would remain an extension of that mess to ultimately take them to what's felt like kind of a, if this is how it was going to wrap up, it took this long, why exactly? But I think it feels indicative of just the dysfunction between the Warriors as a franchise and front office with Jonathan Kaminga. But also I think it speaks to, whether we talk about this more at length or you talk about it more in the Warrior-centric portion of the show, I think it speaks to a big problem that Golden State is going to have in terms of trying to reach the highest ceiling possible. Because with a core of Steph and Jimmy and Draymond, it's obviously a good foundation, but there's only so much you want to push those three guys at their age. And when you look at the rest of the players around them, I think there's no doubt that no player on that roster has the potential to raise their ceiling and add as many different missing dynamics as Kaminga. But he's also a player that Steve Kerr clearly does not want to play more than he has to. Mm-hmm. So that can be limiting. The whole two timelines thing that they very, very prematurely and regrettably were patting themselves on the back about and loudly bragging, it has really come back to bite him in the ass.
It has. I do want to touch on some of the bigger picture Warriors stuff that you alluded to there later on in the show. But in terms of the Kaminga stuff, look, he re-signed. He's there. He's on the roster with a nice contract. We'll see what happens. It sounds like everybody sort of agrees. You're on the roster now. You won't be on the roster forever. It's more of a when as opposed to if he's on the Warriors going forward. But to call it a failure, it does feel a little premature, but it also feels accurate. Like it does sort of feel like the whole Kaminga thing was a failure. And I remember when I was covering the Warriors for Bay Area News Group, I was there for the Kaminga draft. I covered that draft, and the front office was pretty split on whether or not they wanted to draft Jonathan Kaminga. When it became a little bit clear that OKC was going to pass on him and that he was going to be there for Golden State in that draft. And there was definitely some louder voices in that front office that wanted Kaminga, and obviously they won out. But there was people who wanted Josh Giddey. Obviously, he wasn't available anymore. There was a pretty loud contingent that was really interested in Franz Wagner. And I remember writing a column for Bay Area News Group saying, like, don't draft Kaminga. And it has nothing to do with Kaminga as a player, but like in terms of his talent or whether he's worthy of a top 7 pick or anything like that. It has nothing to do with any of that. He doesn't work with what you guys are trying to do. And with Draymond and Steph and Clay at that point obviously already established, there's not going to be he's not going to have the room to roam and to figure out how to do all this stuff. And like I'm not saying this in order to just like pat myself on the back and be like, see, I was right. It was more of like, this was so easy to spot that I spotted it as the column in a column for a newspaper. You know, it wasn't that hard to figure out that this was going to be an issue if you watched any of the Jonathan Kaminga film coming out of the G League Ignite program. And so I think they got way over ahead of their skis. They fell in love with the talent, the physical attributes, all the everything about the player. They fell in love with it. Never really had a plan for how to do it. And that was so clear right away, to your point, because he just didn't work with Steve Kerr, and his coaching staff got frustrated with him time and time again.
Well, I mean, to be clear, the biggest reason the 2 timeline things was a failure was ultimately James Wiseman.
Correct.
Because that was a 2nd overall pick that, frankly, is not an NBA player or does not seem to be. And that was a massive opportunity for the Warriors. If it was possible to bridge the now and the future, you needed to, if not nail that pick, at minimum come up with a quality NBA player.
Yeah,
and they
a rotation
didn't.
piece. Yeah,
like a clear NBA player, and that's not what happened. So to be fair to Jonathan Kaminga or Moses Moody or Pajemski, like any of those guys, the single biggest reason is Wiseman. But the reason I consider the 2 timelines thing a failure is just because the Warriors don't seem all that excited about the future piece of that timeline right now. Like they seem, and I understand, like I understand why they seem most focused on milking every single last drop of the Steph era, both in terms of what wanting to win and also everything Steph represents. And that's fine.
It's great.
Except like with Kaminga, they've had multiple opportunities to trade him over the years to, again, milk the Steph period for as much as they possibly can. They didn't do that. Now they're in this messy place where no matter what teams around the league may think about Kaminga, the Warriors have made it pretty clear, like, we think he's really flawed. Like, we think this guy who we are hoping becomes a significant trade piece for us this season, we think he's a pretty flawed player. And obviously he's flawed for their system, and not frankly, few teams around the league play like the Warriors, but they have been really hyper-focused on the things that he doesn't do well, which I think is going to create wariness around the league with other teams. Like, hey, how is Kaminga going to fit with us, given all the issues they've had? And, the Warriors are considered, I think rightly, one of the more stable organizations around the league. So, and then Moody's a solid, NBA piece, but he's not foundational moving forward. Unless Pajemski, I think, takes significant leaps moving forward. He's a player that can be a part of winning, but he doesn't strike me as foundational. If it ain't Kaminga, then the whole 2 timeline thing really produced nobody that they can help build that future with.
And when you say it that way, it starts to make sense about why they're holding on to Kaminga this way, because he is sort of the last lifeline to any post-Steph future. And my argument the whole time was like, who cares? Like, who cares? We rag on teams like the Lakers or the Nuggets or whoever it is for not maximizing their timeline around LeBron or Nikola Jokic or with the Bucks and Giannis or whatever it is. And the Warriors, like we don't really need you to do the future thing. We kind of want you to maximize. And then, by the way, they trade for Jimmy Butler, and that was sort of a clear signal of we're pretty much just giving up on the 2 timeline thing. And now it's really just a matter of getting value for Kaminga. I don't knock them for not taking Malik Monk and a pick from Sacramento. I really don't. That to me was like not super moving the needle for me. If I'm Golden State, if I think I can.
I don't know if it moves the needle, but I think it would have helped them beat. If nothing else, I think Malik Monk fits better for what they want to do. And if I had to guess, Steve Kerr would feel more comfortable putting Monk on the floor than he will Kaminga.
I think what they're thinking is that trade will be there. that trade will be there. We could do it in December. We could do it in January. And now it obviously would have to be January because that's when Kaminga becomes trade eligible. That trade will be there, or something at least very close to it will be there. And so I don't blame them for taking the long view on it. I really don't. But it does feel like we're at the point of no return here, and obviously we are, because that's basically been the reporting around it. Last thing on Kaminga before we move into the meat of the division preview here. Strip away like the team context stuff here with him. What's the best version of Kaminga look like? Because I'm trying to think of the player comp, right? He's a guy who has all of the tools to be an elite athletic two-way player, has shown flashes of being literally a lockdown defender, but those flashes have been very few and far between. Offensively, he's kind of falls in love with the more inefficient kind of shot chart. So you look at him and you're like, could you be like a poor man's Paul George kind of type? But he has like almost the complete opposite mentality to kind of embrace that kind of role. He's a guy, and I wrote a feature on him again when he was first drafted. He used to steal, or not steal, but take the money that his mom gave him for like his quote unquote allowance when he was living in Africa, and would go to a internet cafe down the road and spend all of his money watching Kobe Bryant highlights. And every player I know his age wants to be Kobe. Like, all of them want to be Kobe. He really wants to be Kobe. Like, when I asked him how many games, like, how did he watch the NBA? He didn't watch NBA games. He watched Kobe Bryant highlights. That's what made him pick up a basketball. Like, there's guys who idolized Kobe Bryant, and then there's like another level, and Jonathan Kaminga is in that another level.
Well, it's interesting, and I covered for your audience who isn't familiar with the entirety of my career. I covered the last 10 years of Kobe's career, and I was around his teams a lot, around practices, stuff like that. Spent a lot of time watching Kobe. And for all the obvious comp, and I would say even jokes about, of course, Jonathan Kaminga idolized Kobe because he wanted to be a number one scoring option with the ball in his hands. Like, you know, no shot is a bad shot because in Kobe's mind, he can make those shots. And by the way, he was often right. Kobe, I think Jay Adonde phrased it this way. I think he's correct. Kobe may be the best bad shot maker or difficult shot maker in league history. Like, just the degree of difficulty with some of these shots Kobe took and then made were off the charts. But I will say this, if Kaminga really was watching the Kobe film, he should watch the entirety of the Kobe film and the entirety of everything Kobe did, because prime Kobe was an exceptionally well-rounded player. Like, he was a lockdown first team all defense. He was a very good rebounder for his position. Kobe was, for all the talk about him being a ball stopper and a ball hog and yada, 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 Kobe was an exceptional passer. And when he was in the mood to be a floor general, I used to say all the time, if Kobe had entered the league wanting to be a Hall of Fame point guard, Kobe would have ended his career as a Hall of Fame point guard, because he had that type of floor vision and passing skills and creativity.
He was so ahead of it.
Basketball IQ, just IQ period. Kobe was an incredibly smart person off the court, beyond everything he did on it. So I would say if Kaminga is watching Kobe highlights, that's great. There are far worse players for young guys to look to emulate. I would just say he should watch everything Kobe's doing and not just the scoring.
So let's move on to our division preview part here. So we're going to start with which teams got better, and then we'll move on to which teams got worse. I think there have been some previews I've done here, Andy, that this has been a little bit of a tougher exercise. Like, did this team get better? Did this team get worse? I think with this division, this segment is exceptionally easy. I think we know, to me, there are 3 teams that clearly got better, and there are 2 teams that clearly got worse. One team purposely got worse, and the other team kind of did it by accident, as they always do. Not to give it away too much, but let's start with your Lakers. Obviously, they get better, right? Yes. Unless you disagree with me. Okay.
No, I think they definitely. I think they got better, arguably more than any team in the league, or excuse me, any team in the division. But
so they add Marcus Smart, they add Jake LaRavia, they add DeAndre Ayton. Gone, Dorian Finney-Smith, Jordan Goodwin, Shake Milton, Trey Jemison. And really, it's worth mentioning full year of Luka Doncic, who
Yes.
also looks like he might be in the best shape of his career. I'm going to consider that like a fraction of an ad, but it might obviously be the
I
biggest
think it's
deal
more
going.
than a fraction.
Yeah.
In the notes, you let me know some of the things you'd be asking about when I was considering this. I said it might feel like a cheat to include full training camp with Luka, but it's not. It's a really big deal.
Yeah. So you said that they might be the best. They might have gotten better than any other team in the division, which is interesting because you look on paper, and the only reason I said it's a fraction of an ad is because he was literally on the roster last year. So I'm like looking on paper. Like you look at the Clippers, they added players. The Warriors added players. The Lakers added a couple of guys, but the Luka thing is the big. It's the biggest factor.
They added 3 rotational players, and in particular, they added rotational players that directly addressed needs. Like the Lakers needed a starting caliber center, and whatever flaws you think DeAndre Ayton has, and I think a lot of the criticism he's taken over the years, I don't think it's all entirely fair, but I think some of it is. Regardless, he is a legit starting center. I don't think you can debate that otherwise. He fills a massive need for the Lakers. Marcus Smart, assuming...
Well, can I stop you on Ayton?
Sure.
Because I've heard you say this on Locked On Lakers, and it's a great point, right? It's you go from basically having to play a two-way guy at the center position to now getting, and I agree with you, a bona fide, certified starting level center.
Yeah.
He's not going to ever be the number one pick, DeAndre Ayton. We know that. That's gone. Ship sailed. Sorry. Never going to happen.
Here's what's
have to be that for this team.
Thank you. That's that's the Suns' burden to bear and be bitter about, that he was not worth the number 1 overall pick. The Lakers don't need that. They need him to be a starting caliber center who can help them in much needed rebounding. He's never averaged less than 10 rebounds a game.
He's a good rebounder.
He's a very good offensive rebounder as well, so that can help get the Lakers better possessions. He is a good pick and roll partner, but also I think a decent pick and pop partner, like in that mid-range area. He is not a high-end defensive center, but I think he can be a better lane deterrent just through his overall physicality and size than Jackson Hayes was. He's got a little bit of quickness if you need him to switch a little bit in certain situations and stuff like that. But just he's a massive upgrade over Jackson Hayes, who is somewhere between a second to third string caliber center in the league and the two-way guys they were playing last year. He represents something significant they did not have at all. And that's before you get to Marcus Smart, assuming he's healthy, addressing the perimeter defensive issues that I think are still there for this team, but he at least helps bring a dimension that wasn't there. And Jake LaRavia, I think, in certain respects, will replace some of what DFS did. And he's a connecting player. And I think contending teams need connecting players.
I want to go back to Ayton because I do think it's one of the more fascinating additions here. Because I agree with everything you said. And I think it's really well put where you say that he was the number 1 pick for Phoenix. It's been 2 teams since then, right? It's been Phoenix, it's been Portland, and now it's with the Lakers. And I know people kind of roll their eyes because, look, DeAndre Ayton stepped in it in the past, right? With the dominating stuff. I want to be a max guy. Now I'm always a max guy and all this stuff. He's definitely stepped in it. He's also really young. He was the number 1 pick. He has been a projected number 1 pick, by the way, his entire life. Like, you look at his recruiting background and all that, like, this guy was just like silver spoon in a lot of ways in terms of just athletic gifts. He has, I think, been humbled a little bit, and I actually really liked his media day quotes. And this is not from a guy. I am not a Lakers fan. I don't cover the team. I am an outsider completely, and I see those quotes, and I'm like, yep. And again, you can roll your eyes and say, oh, he's like, now I'm playing for something that matters and all this stuff, and you're like, well, you were, on a championship team, and then you kind of shit the bed after that. Yes, he did. He was young.
But he did play, but he was a big part of that team going to the finals. Like,
he was.
And then, it's been pretty well documented that he was entering a contract year and the Suns had told him, do these things that aren't necessarily number 1 overall, statsy type things, some of the proverbial little things, some of the dirty work, and you will get paid. He did all that stuff in the finals run. And then they said, well, if you can find a contract, we'll match it. And I'm not saying that there isn't an onus on Ayton to be a professional, even that situation? Of course there is. Like, he has to own accountability, but that can be disillusioning for, somebody who's in his early 20s. But also, I think if we're all being honest, in our jobs, whatever we do, if you are told to do certain things that aren't necessarily glamorous, that feel like sacrifice, and there will be a reward for doing it, and you do it, and your bosses turn around and say, well, we're not going to actually give you the rewards that we promised, that's going to piss you off in your job. It will.
So yeah, and then he goes to, I love Portland as a city. So
It's a great city.
I think it's a great city. Basketball players tend to not feel the same way. It's a little bit of sort of, oh, now we're in the Pacific Northwest. We're kind of stranded out here. He goes from Phoenix, which is a place that NBA players tend to like very much, to a little bit of a basketball Siberia in Portland on a losing situation. And then they draft his replacement. I can understand why he'd be like, not totally psyched about it here. I'm willing to give up money if it means I get to go to Los Angeles and play for an organization like the Lakers alongside, by the way, Luka Doncic and LeBron James. I've also seen this point here. And maybe, look, I might be way too bullish on DeAndre Ayton. I fully admit it. I might have fallen in love with the finals run and all this stuff.
For what it's worth, I'm pretty bullish on what he's going to do this season too.
So then there is nobody here to balance us. There is no checks and balances here. So let's roll with it. But I've seen a lot of people say, well, you want him to be a rim running center because that's what works with Luka. DeAndre Ayton isn't really that. He likes to play in the mid range and kind of hit those those jumpers and well, yeah, he has. He's also never played with a guy quite like Luka. Even Chris Paul, who is as great of a pick and roll creator as there is, he doesn't look for the lob quite as much as Luka looks for the. Not at that stage in Chris Paul's career. Like with DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin, it was a little bit different. Last time I checked, I don't know that there were players that didn't love points. And if Luka is going to be spoon feeding DeAndre Ayton points, and he has to get him easier at the basket as opposed to settling for 13, 14, 15-foot jumpers, something tells me he'll be okay with it if it means he's getting the easiest 15 points of his career per game.
Well, I mean, let me put it this way. If you believe all the knocks on DeAndre Ayton, that he's low motor, doesn't necessarily care, doesn't want to take the hardest route possible, then it stands to reason that he's going to love being spoon-fed around the rim. Like, you can't have this both ways.
Right. Let's talk about Marcus Smart. Again, fascinating here. Lower on the Marcus Smart edition than I am the DeAndre Ayton edition. Two reasons why. I know JJ Redick told him, hey, if you could be Celtics Marcus Smart, then you're exactly what we need. And Marcus Smart is saying, like, I could definitely do that because I am Celtics Marcus Smart. I don't think he is anymore. It's been 2 years now where I haven't seen it. It's really hard to get that kind of thing back. You don't typically see players like Marcus Smart at this stage of their career kind of hit the reset button and go back to something. Now, everything we've heard is that his conditioning is better and things like that. I think he can be better than what he was in Memphis, which would just require being on the court and healthy. I think he could be better than what he was down the stretch of last year with Washington, with playing for a losing team that wasn't really doing anything. But for Marcus Smart deserves a ton of credit for that Wizards. He tried for that Wizards team. Like, he was actually out there playing basketball. But in terms of being the perimeter defender, I don't know that that's there anymore for him. Even Memphis and Washington kind of used him more as an off-ball wing defender. And if that's what he's doing with the Lakers, I think that's fine. I think, like, obviously they would still have a glaring need at point of attack, and maybe he has to step into that spot anyway. But if he's guarding wings, I think he's very capable of doing that. I'm just a little hesitant to be like, yeah, they solved their point of attack defense issues with Marcus Smart. A, because he's just older. B, played, 50 combined games over the last 2 years. I have questions about his health overall and if he's even going to be available. But I do think it'll be overall a net positive, if anything, because they need somebody to take ownership of the defense that isn't JJ Redick. Like, they need a player. And we know one thing about Marcus Smart is he's going to hold teammates accountable. He's going to be communicating on the court. He's going to be connecting stuff. I think that might be where his value is more to this defense than locking up Steph Curry in a basketball game.
It's interesting you say that, because in some respects, I think that's one of the more direct areas where Marcus Smart is replacing Dorian Finney-Smith. Like Dorian Finney-Smith came into the Lakers locker room midseason last year, and his voice immediately mattered, which is something very consistent with DFS's career. I imagine that once he is healthy for Houston, unfortunately, it was just announced that he's going to be missing the beginning of the season, recovering from offseason ankle surgery. I imagine DFS's voice will matter in that locker room. And by the way, they need a voice, particularly with Fred VanVleet out for the season. And he was one of the most important voices. And for all the things Kevin Durant does extremely well, I don't think that is particularly high on the list. So they're going to need someone. I think DFS will be helpful there. I agree Marcus Smart will be helpful along those lines as well. As far as what he does on the court, I agree with you. Defensive Player of the Year, Marcus Smart, feels like a tall ask. You mentioned the recent string of injuries. He is already dealing with some Achilles tendinopathy. That was just announced when training camp began. Marcus Smart has not been, unless as of this recording things change, but I doubt it will. He has not been fully engaged in practices, full participant, any stuff like that. I think his availability for the season opener, I'm not going to say that it's in jeopardy yet just because it's too early and I don't know enough information, but I don't think it's also a given that he'll be there either. They need him, though, to help improve the perimeter defense, if not solve the problem. Like, I agree with you. Solving the perimeter defense, solving the point of attack defense, that feels like a bit premature. First of all, it's too much to put on one guy anyway. Frankly, I think Jared Vanderbilt, his health and availability, which on the plus side has seemed terrific so far in training camp. The second day of practice for the Lakers was basically JJ Redick and various players taking turns praising how good Vando looks. I think in some respects, Vando may play a larger role in that than Smart, but the two of them together and healthy and available, that's what's going to, if not solve it, significantly offset the issues the Lakers had last year. But just bringing in somebody like Smart, who is an improvement over what they had, and if nothing else, can prevent as many opportunities of Austin Reeves having to do this on top of his offensive responsibilities, or like we saw a lot last year, putting Rui Hachimura in a situation where he has to check guards because there's nobody else to do it. And as much as Rui tried, like, that's not really a fair ask of him. So just having Marcus Smart there to do some of that, even if he can't do it at peak Marcus Smart level, it's an upgrade from what was there before.
Surprisingly, at least I was surprised by it. I think JJ Redick might be best at coaching defense. And you would think maybe it would have been the opposite for JJ Redick, who was not a good defensive player by any stretch. And that was probably just more athletic limitations. But obviously everybody knows three-point shooting offensively. He talked a lot about offense, during his broadcast career. I know that there is some debate about the Lakers defense in the second half of last year and how real it was versus not. And it did slip towards the end after being like whatever it was in number one, number two in defensive rating for like a month and a half or whatever. I don't care very much about the numbers where they ranked for that stretch. I know that there's some shooting luck and stuff like that. Were they leaving the right players open? Were they just missing shots? All this stuff. We can do the stats. We could dive into them. I've definitely talked about it. People have written about it. People have talked about it. Here's where I come down on it. I'm more, again, bullish about the Lakers defense because I saw the buy-in from the players in the system that Redick had. And as long as that buy-in stays, there's enough length that can overcome some of the concerns that I have with point of attack defense. Like if you get by him, okay, there's big arms of Rui Hachimura, DeAndre Ayton, LeBron James, Luka Doncic. Like all these guys are there. Their lineup is pretty big, right? Like the only small guy is going to be Austin Reeves and then maybe Marcus Smart if he ends up starting over Rui. But I don't know. I don't think they're going to be an amazing defense. They're not going to be one of the top 5 defenses in the league. I think they can at least do enough to get to be average. And then if you've got Luka, LeBron, Rui, even Reeves has shown flashes of like really cranking it up defensively in crucial moments at end of games. If you can kind of just get a couple of stops at the end, I think the formula looks a little bit like what Denver's formula was in 2023.
Yeah, it's interesting. As far as the idea of the buy-in, I think you really hit on something important, in particular, the buy-in from LeBron.
Hmm.
Like I more than the addition of Dorian Finney-Smith or schemes or Jordan Goodwin actually I thought played kind of an
I kind of wish
overlooked.
he came back.
So I don't kind of wish he was back. I wish he was back.
Can you
I
explain why they had to let him go to make room for Marcus Smart? Because I would have loved to have Goodwin there
they,
with Marcus Smart.
in order to get the full, I believe, biannual exception,
That's what it was. Okay.
yeah, it's cap stuff. I think in a perfect world, they would have preferred to keep Jordan Goodwin. He's the guy that had the non fully guaranteed contract without getting
Hmm.
super into the weeds, cap stuff. But I think in a perfect world, they would have liked to have kept him. I think JJ should have played Jordan Goodwin. I said this a lot on Locked On Lakers and on Lakers Talk, my weekly Lakers show for ESPN LA, 710 in Los Angeles. I think JJ could have and should have played Goodwin more in the playoffs. I think his presence helped that defensive surge they had. But more than anything, LeBron's buy-in. And I think LeBron committing to that end of the floor, it helps just because when LeBron wants to, he can still be a very effective defender, but also it creates an entire team-wide accountability because if the old man's out there busting his ass defensively, there's no excuse for anybody else not to do it. Like you have to do it. In the same way that I think Luka's commitment this offseason to conditioning and fitness and seems like so far at least more accountability defensively, it creates, I think, an entire team-wide excitement and like a let's effing go from everybody. Like just you see that, but also, and it excites you, but also there's oh wow, I need to step up what I'm doing because if Luka spent his entire offseason transforming his body in anticipation of stepping up his own game, I got to match that. Players take cues from their leaders. I don't think the defense during that period was fake or all smoke and mirrors because they did it repeatedly over game after game after game. At some point, that has to be real. I think the problem is just not sustainable. Like it's so exhausting and taxing to essentially be doing all that to offset specifically lack of rim protection. I'm hopeful that DeAndre Ayton being there just prevents them from having to play that level of balls to the walls, flying all over the place for 82 games. And Luka maybe being more mobile, Vanderbilt being healthy, I think would help a lot along these lines. It's just too taxing over 82 games, much less 82 games and however long they're in the playoffs.
We've hit it a number of times, but there's so many reasons why DeAndre Ayton is one of the best, most 5 interesting players in the league this year. I mean, it's so important. He's such a hinge piece for them. I don't want to spend a ton of time on the LeBron load management stuff, but this was sort of the headline coming out of training camp at the Lakers is, they're ramping him up slowly, age, 23rd season, all this stuff. The reason I don't want to spend a ton of time on it is because we really don't know what this looks like. It's brand new. I will like LeBron is very famous for saying, I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to take a load off and then not. So eventually it feels like he has to eventually kind of slow down at some, and he obviously already is in some respects, but it's just something that's out there. I thought we kind of had to mention it, but I don't want to overreact to it because we just don't know what it's going to look like unless you disagree. Maybe you think it's a little bit more material.
No, I mean, we don't know. I mean, they're ramping him up during training camp, and he's got this nerve irritation in the glute area that they're obviously going to be careful about. And there's a certain amount of caution that would be exercised during training camp under any circumstances, just because all the reasons that were mentioned before. LeBron does not like to load management. He does not like to take games off. I think he looks, and there's positives and negatives to this, I think he looks to often find rest within the game when he can. I think the best way for the Lakers to load manage LeBron is play as well as they can and as focused and purposeful as they can for 3 quarters, create big leads, and then give LeBron rest in the 4th quarter. Like, I think that's actually the most practical way to try to get him, if you want to call it load managed throughout a season, because the truth is the West is too competitive. Like, they do not have the luxury of truly load managing LeBron in a, Greg Popovich DNP old type way.
Right.
You
But
can't
could they do it in a Greg Popovichian way of Tim Duncan doesn't play more than 30 minutes a night during the regular season?
I think they'd love to do that if they could.
Right.
I think that will be difficult to do with the second best player on your team. Just look around the league, and other than maybe the Thunder, I don't know of a team that can get by playing their second best player 30-ish minutes a night as a cap and still maintain the pace that you need in the West. It's just really difficult.
And exactly. And that's why I'm going to wait and see what this actually looks like before we have what this means.
I'll say this. If it becomes a thing that has to happen, I think it dramatically impacts the Lakers' ceiling for this season. It's a problem.
Well said. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. The Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing tickets and experiences in a few taps. It's incredibly easy to use, and the Game Time guarantee means you can trust you'll get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Plus, fees are always included, so what you see is what you pay, like college football tickets as low as $25 this season. Again, fees are included. That means you're going to know your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Game Time offers a ton of great features like zone deals. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Also, with your favorites, you can snag new ticket deals before anybody else finds out by following your favorite teams in the Game Time app to receive alerts to your phone. With Seat Views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, and with their lowest price guarantee, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find cheaper tickets somewhere else. And with Game Time's ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Download the Game Time app today. Let's move on to the other team in LA, the Los Angeles Clippers. They add Brook Lopez, John Collins, Bradley Beal, Chris Paul. They lose Norm Powell in the John Collins swap. Amir Coffey also gone. And then there's the Kawhi Leonard scandal, which we've talked about it on the show already a bunch, so we don't necessarily need to do the particulars of the scandal unless you have a take that you necessarily have to get off. I imagine you've talked about it a ton too. So we can just breeze by it if we want, but it will impact, I think,
this. I'll say this as my summary of the Clippers situation: Occam's razor. And for those unfamiliar with it, look it up and you'll know what I'm talking about. That's all I would say is just Occam's razor.
On paper, this team got better.
Yeah, I would agree.
The Kawhi stuff to me is an issue, and there's been a lot of people, smart people, who disagree with me, who think, hey, Kawhi's availability has always been an issue. It's always kind of something going on with him. It's always a little bit of a distraction with him because he's so sort of off on his own, and you don't really know what's going on there. And so the Clippers and Ty Lue have navigated these waters before, and you look at all the guys they got, and they're just so much better as a roster, so much more dynamic, so much more versatile. And I agree with a lot of that stuff. I also don't think they've ever dealt with a distraction quite like this. This just feels different in tenor, in magnitude. And when I'm trying to go through this and I say, okay, this team got better, this team got worse, this was the only one I actually had a hard time with because, again, on paper, they clearly got better, I think. But in practice, this team won 50 games last year. They were pretty good. They should win 50 games again. And I had them projected to easily clear 50 games before all the Kawhi scandal stuff. But these are the kinds of distractions that can tank an entire season regardless of the offseason additions that you made. And that would be my big fear if I were a Clippers fan, is this Kawhi thing just takes on a life of its own more than it already has and becomes such a distraction during the regular season that all this on-paper stuff can't really function the way we hoped.
I'm not as concerned about that just because unless Kawhi gets suspended or I guess his contract gets voided or something like that, and he's quite literally not available to play for the Clippers or no longer on the Clippers, there's not really much that can come of this investigation that I think will directly affect the basketball this season. It may affect the future for the Clippers moving forward, and that's obviously a big deal. But it doesn't really have much to do with this season. And Kawhi has always been so inscrutable his whole career that I don't know. Again, unless this leads to him being suspended, I don't know if you're even going to know the difference in a lot of ways with Kawhi. Like he has dealt with a lot of stuff, like this. If you believe everything that Pablo Torre has been uncovering, and guys like John Corrales over at the Locked On Network with us, some of the reporting they've done, these are things that Kawhi has been dealing with and keeping secret for years anyway. So he's been juggling this anyway, and it hasn't been an issue. To me, if injuries don't trip up Kawhi, I don't think this situation is really going to affect the Clippers on the court, just because I'm not sure what can come of the investigation other than a suspension of Kawhi that would actually affect the team. Like if, say, they lose draft, like if, say, Adam Silver announces a punishment that involves loss of draft picks moving forward, that's obviously a massive deal for the Clippers, but it doesn't affect them this season. It doesn't really hurt them for the now. I think the additions that they made, the Clippers might have the best depth in the league when it comes to just guys on your roster that you can put on the court without being worried that they're not NBA players or that they really have no business being on the court. They're not ready to be out there. They got like 11 or 12 guys that you can, they may have flaws, they may have weaknesses, whatever, but you can confidently put them on the court knowing they're NBA players. There aren't a lot of teams like that. There's a collective age issue. 3 of the 4 newcomers that they brought in, Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, Brook Lopez, have age, injury concerns, or both. John Collins is the only guy they brought in his 20s. And he's an interesting guy in his own right, just because it's been so long since John Collins has played basketball that anybody has cared about at all. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like in this situation. I think they are very susceptible to age and attrition and injuries, but they've got a lot of guys on this roster that can play. They've got a lot. They've got a lot of pieces that I think fit together very well. Like remove the age question and the number next to all these guys' names that largely begin with a 3, and just look at the skill sets. The skill sets are pretty well meshed.
I love the roster. Let's play it out, talk about this basketball team on paper. I love this roster. I have 2 rules. People have heard me say it. I don't know if you've heard me say it. I have 2 rules when it comes to covering the NBA. Never trust the Clippers. And don't watch the Hornets after February. And that's it. Those are my 2 rules. There's no reason
What's
to watch
the reason for watching them pre-February, just out of curiosity?
To do your job. But I let myself off
Fair.
the hook.
Fair.
I let myself off the hook. By then, LaMelo's hurt and nobody cares.
Including LaMelo.
At least by then. I hear you about the age concerns. I think they're almost so deep that I don't care about it. You know what I mean? Like Harden is an innings eater. That guy's going to play so many regular season games. Yeah. I kind of love the addition of Chris Paul for this team.
I do too.
Because last year, and this wasn't even necessarily a bad thing, but their offense kind of had 2 modes, and they would toggle between the 2 very distinct offenses. One was James Harden runs pick and roll with Ivica Zubac, and that was incredibly efficient. And then the other one was dump the ball into the post to Kawhi and let him go to work, and that was incredibly efficient when he was at his best. Chris Paul, that's just a new ingredient. It's a new menu item. It's something else that they could do. It's, okay, well, when it's not Harden and when it's not Kawhi, we can at least grab 5 to 10 minutes a night of Chris Paul making things work offensively for us.
He's one of the all-time great floor raisers in NBA history.
Yep. And you look at some of the shooters on this roster, and I'm like, okay, he's going to kick out to Collins in the corner. I think he'll be on the court with Bradley Beal or Harden, so he's going to be able to kick out to those guys. Obviously Kawhi is a great spot-up shooter. Like these guys there's Derrick Jones Jr. is a little up and down, but he's pretty reliable as a spot-up guy at this point of his career. So, yeah, I think Chris Paul can make things happen. The John Collins thing, to me, I think we could put a pin in that for maybe a later section. But and then you add Brook Lopez. between Zubac, who I have as a top 8 or 9 center in the league. I think he was easily one of the best 5 centers in the league last season.
Really good.
Really good. And then you add Brook Lopez to that. And they might have the best 1-2 punch at center in the league at this point, outside of maybe Cleveland with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley. So I really like a lot of what this Clippers roster is. My concern, though, is have we added too much Chris Paul, Bradley Beal, John Collins, Brook Lopez to the point where I'm having to play guys like Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. a little bit less than what I did last year, because they felt so like there was a clear framework in place of how it worked, where it was Zubac, Derek Jones Jr., and Chris Dunn kind of being the backbone of a really good defense, the third-rated defense in the league. And then sort of Kawhi and James Harden just figuring it out offensively. And as we said, they did enough. Do the additions of these big-name veterans start to diminish the roles of those Derek Jones Jr.'s and Chris Dunn's, who are so like toolsy and fundamental to what the backbone of this defense was?
I think it depends on whether or not Ty Lue has discussed with Chris Paul, with Brook Lopez, with even Bradley Beal. I want to try to limit your minutes up to a certain point. I mean, frankly, with Lopez and Chris Paul, you should be looking to do that anyway. They're in their late 30s, or is Chris Paul now 40? He's close to 40 if he's not 40. Like, I know Chris Paul played 82 games last year, and that's
40.
You know, yeah, and by the way, that's something that kind of flew under the radar. Chris Paul playing 82 games at his age last year was
unbelievable,
pretty amazing. But there's a natural cap to the workload you want to put on those guys anyway. You know, Bradley Beal has had, I know he's not old, but he's had a lot of injury concerns over the course of his career. So there should be, I think, a certain cap to the workload you want to put on those guys anyway. I think it's one of those areas where Ty Lue, as a very respected coach, and also somebody that I think is a very good communicator and somebody that players seem to bond with in terms of just, I will orchestrate your vision. I understand what you want to do. I trust you for what you want to do. I think Ty Lue is about as well equipped a coach in the league to deal with this potential issue that you're talking about. And I've heard other people raise that question as well. Like, will some of those really important defensive players who don't necessarily grab the headlines or the stats, but really matter, are they going to get squeezed? I would say if Ty Lue allows that to happen, it means either these newcomers are much better at filling the cracks that Jones or Dunn would than anybody expected, or he's leaning into all offense and just we're going to outscore everybody, or I guess leaning into the status of those guys. But I would think that if Ty Lue could have hard conversations with prime LeBron, he can have hard conversations with Brook Lopez in his late 30s.
And that's the other part of this too. If I trust a coach to figure this stuff out, it's Ty Lue. He's on a short list of coaches who I trust to figure this stuff out for the exact reasons you already said. And I'm by the way very interested to see what Bradley Beal looks like when playing for a team that's not actively trying to make him unhappy to the point that he gives up $50 million. Like, just the guy's a really good three-point shooter still. He shot basically 40% when he was happy in Phoenix versus when they were trying to make him miserable. So
did they have splits, happy versus unhappy? Like,
for him, they
like
should.
The
Actually, we could probably come up with like an all happy versus unhappy NBA team. Let's do Warriors quickly because we already talked about it a little bit with Kaminga, and I have a bigger Warriors section coming up later. But we both had them getting better. I think that's very obvious. But
I said I think they're about the same. Actually,
tell me why.
I think because their new additions don't necessarily move me that much. DeAnthony Melton is not going to be ready at the start of the season. Gary Payton II is, I think, a good back of the rotation type player, but I don't think he moves the needle much. Al Horford, I'm very curious to see what he looks like on it. I know he's still playing at a pretty, he's playing it somewhere between a solid to high level for a guy of his age, and that's pretty awesome. He's also, though, going to be for the first time in a long time on a team not surrounded by a lot of young athletes who I think can offset some of the issues that specifically an aging guy like Al Horford may have. He is now, the foundation that he's playing with is just as old as him. So I'm curious to see exactly what that looks like. I have a ton of respect for Al Horford. Like, I think he's had a tremendous career. He seems like as high a character a guy in the NBA as we have. I'm not as bullish on him being a big addition for the Warriors as the grand consensus seems to be, just because I think the setup is so much different than it was in Boston. I need to see it. I'm also concerned about how much the big three can push themselves over the course of the season. Jimmy, I know that there was a jolt of energy last season for, I think, both the team and Jimmy when Jimmy arrived, but that was something that both sides desperately needed. The context has changed a lot. Like, Jimmy is the new normal, and this is now a full year of those guys having to play at a certain level, and they're obviously all still very good players, but just I have a lot of concerns about the attrition with them, and I don't know if they got worse. I don't think they've gotten worse, but I'm not as convinced as a lot of people that they actually got better.
They feel to me like a car with a faulty transmission, and you got to get it replaced, but the check doesn't come in until the end of the month, and you got a week left until the end of the month, and you're just hoping that this thing gets you to work every day, and you're just waiting for it to break down.
Except that's a long week in NBA season. That's a
Correct.
long week.
Yes, and for the Warriors, by the way, also for playoff series, and that's my biggest concern with them is
they're not a playoff. They're not a deep playoff run contender at all.
And this is what I'll tell you this because I think it's interesting, but I also said it later in the show. But to me, for Steph, it's not about championships anymore. Like, the Warriors and Warriors fans could disagree, and they could say we're going to keep going for it, and I respect it. I do. I respect trading for Jimmy and going for it. I respect all of it.
I have no problem with it.
It's not about accomplishments anymore for Steph. It's about moments. And I even think it's the same thing for LeBron. Not so much for Luka, right? So it's a little bit of a different context with the Lakers, but it's at these guys, just give us a moment in the playoffs in games that matter. That's all we really care about. And that's why overall I like the Warriors, what they did, because I think they fortified the roster enough to get them into the playoffs, which, like, that was a question before they made the Jimmy Butler trade, right? That they would even get there. So I like that they did enough to where I feel like, yep, I at least think that you can win a play-in game and get there at the very least. And they could also be top 6 in the West. I think that's in the realm.
I think it's possible. I don't think it's probable, but I think it's possible.
Agreed. Let's talk about who got worse. The Suns got worse. They did it on purpose. They a purposeful reset. Matt Ishbia at Media Day talking about how success,
you mean hands-on Matt Ishbia?
Not going to be measured in wins. It's going to be measured in success, or whatever he said. I know that there was jokes, but I appreciated the slice of humble pie that he was sharing with everybody.
But even his humble pie, I think Matt Ishbia, I'll just be candid, I think he's a loon. I think that guy is an absolute lunatic. It is very difficult, and I think Suns fans will know this, to potentially be a worse owner than Robert Sarver. And so it's clear, at least there's no evidence that Matt Ishbia is a worse human being than Robert Sarver. Low bar to clear, but nonetheless, he does not seem to be a worse human being based on what we know already. But that said, I think it is possible that with the basketball, he could end up a worse owner than Robert Sarver, because thus far he has been, I think, hyper aggressive in every single move he's made, and does not seem to understand that he doesn't seem to understand what he doesn't know. But the reason I said, like, the humble pie didn't even feel like humble pie. Remember when, I think it was ESPN had some pundits panel where, do you think the Suns will finish? Yada, yada. Suns, I think, got worse or, low record. And he said something to the effect of, well, these so-called experts a couple of years ago said that we're going to be contenders, and they were wrong about that. I'm like, bro, they were wrong about the team you bragged about putting together. Like you were as enthusiastic or more than any of these pundits. Like,
right.
I mean, for our purposes, keep talking. For Suns fans' purposes, just shut the F up. Just shut up. Stop talking.
There is a little bit of a Jerry Jones thing happening, which is an extreme. Nobody will ever be full Jerry Jones other than Jerry Jones, but like nobody doubts Jerry Jones's ability to build a valuable franchise, right? Like the Dallas Mavericks, very valuable. What he's done off the field is very interesting. I think what Matt Ishbia has done off the court is very interesting with the TV rights that he's got with the Phoenix Suns,
Sure.
the way that he's increased the value of the franchise. I think all of that stuff is very good business ownership stuff and shouldn't be discounted. But to your point, probably
that's
too involved with the product.
That stuff fans don't care about. Fans
don't
do not
necessarily care about
the
it.
value of the franchise. They do not. Other than this new TV deal, I think making games more accessible to them
Very
because of
interesting.
local rights stuff. And good on as much as I was just bagging on Ishbia before, I want to be fair. Good on him for that, because that is something that fans will appreciate a lot. I think he needs to try to pry himself out of the offices where basketball decisions are made, and he seems incapable of it.
Right. It would be nice if he just didn't do the press conferences and he allowed the GMs and the coaches and the players to talk about it at like a normal media day. Like I don't know if he looks across the league. Is he wondering why other owners aren't talking at media day?
But when we were talking about, and I agree with you, they got worse this offseason. It's not just the moves they made, like trading Kevin Durant, bringing in Jalen Green, bringing in Dylan Brooks, the drafting of Kamen Maljovac, which, he is probably a TBD type player in terms of success or failure with that pick. They got worse this year. But even if you want to say there's some intentionality with getting worse with a reset, the Bradley Beal wave and stretch to me was insane. I do not understand for the life of me why they did that this year. Like, what is the point to putting several years of $20-ish million worth of dead money around Devin Booker as you're trying to build around him? If nothing else, I would have waited a year to do that. Like the difference between, say, 10 million in dead money versus 20 million is massive. I mean, other than saving the money, which great. I mean, happy for Matt Ishbia, but like in terms of the basketball, I do not. At least with the Bucks waving and stretching Dame, that directly led to Miles Turner. And if you want to say Miles Turner isn't worth it, fine, whatever. But at least there was a direct basketball purpose for it. I do not understand.
This felt more like a vibe shift, or at least an attempt at a vibe shift, which to your point,
pay him $50 million to stay away. I mean, like really, if you have to, like if the vibes were that bad, but from a basketball perspective, I think it's a disastrous decision.
So the road to redemption for Matt Ishbia begins here, right? There is at least a direction here where if it works, it works. And
is there?
They're saying, well, I think they're saying the right things in terms of trying to build a foundation and development and all these things. And again, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it, but at least they're saying it. And that's why I say like the road to redemption starts here. I don't know if I believe that it's going to happen. I'm just saying like you're starting here. Okay. Just to recap their moves really quick too for the audience. They add Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green, Mark Williams, Nigel Hayes-Davis, Jordan Goodwin, Jared Butler. To your point, before they drafted Kamen Maljovac, also added Rasheer Fleming in the draft. They lose Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Tyus Jones, Cody Martin, Mason Plumlee. They obviously got worse. There's no Durant, there's no Beal, there's no Tyus Jones. They got worse. But to your point now, we at least know what the direction is because they, have that dead cap money for Bradley Beal on the books so long that they kind of have to build around these rookies and these guys on rookie scale contracts because it's cheap talent around a guy like Devin Booker. They get Devin Booker to sign that extension, which to me is a freaking miracle for Suns ownership. Like whatever you want to say about the Suns offseason, the fact that they got Booker, he does. But the fact that they got Booker to sign that extension is the biggest win. He didn't have to even sign it this summer. And he's still recommitted. Now, who knows what it means a year from now if he gets unhappy or whatever. But the fact is, he is happy now. He is under contract. They have so much leverage over him in that way. So I think they got worse. They did it on purpose. I think they. If I'm going to be an optimist, I like the pieces. I like that they solved the center issue by throwing money at it. We'll see if Mark Williams or Kyle Malawach ends up working out, but it's still it's a little bit like the Lakers situation where, hey, it's better than what you had last year.
But even then, though, what I think is the difference between the Lakers situation with Ayton and what's going on with Phoenix is if you want to start seeing what you have in Malawach, you have to play him and you have to have the patience to live with his mistakes and really develop him. But they're talking like they at least want to win now. I mean, I don't mean win a championship. I just mean win games now and be competitive now, which is something that, if nothing else, will help prevent Devin Booker from eventually asking for a trade. If you're doing that, why are you trading for Mark Williams, who at this point, he is extension eligible. I doubt he's going to get an extension this season, but you have to give him a fair amount of time on the court. You gave up capital to bring him in, so that may create some degree of pressure to re-sign him, which at that point, then again, what do you have Malawach for? I'd like to think that they are looking around for Nick Richards trades because he's also on the roster. Shout out to the Suns for reuniting the Charlotte Hornets front court rotation. I don't think anybody saw that coming, but there's not, to me, a clear path with what you do with Malawach. And, even a guy like Jalen Green, who they'll be looking to evaluate what he can do. I know there's been talk about him potentially being their point guard. They need a point guard, so I guess might as well be Jalen Green, but you want to have the best potential setting to evaluate what you have in him and how much, if at all, you want to be committing. But there's a lot of redundancy between him and Devin Booker, the guy that is seemingly most important to keep happy. Even if you want to look at their moves in the present, I think their roster kind of makes no sense.
There's no world to me, and they could say whatever they want about Jalen Green and where they're going to play him and how much they love him. There's no world to me where Jalen Green and Devin Booker work on a basketball court together. There's just no world where it works.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think their roster, even as a reset, I don't think their roster makes sense.
I think they've added talent, young talent, and I would be surprised if all of these guys are here in 2 years. You know what I mean? I think that might be. And for the record, I think they did. Look, they shot themselves in the foot with the Kevin Durant thing. The way they handled Kevin Durant at the trade deadline was a massive blunder. I don't know the last time we've seen an owner. Maybe the last time was with Bradley Beal. I guess was the last time you made a star that unhappy. That
same owner,
the same owner. So. That was crazy. But what they ended up getting for Kevin Durant was pretty decent in terms of asset return.
It really, Green or Malawach, it's too early to truly know how well they did. And I agree with you. There was a ceiling.
Got Dylan Brooks in it. Good player.
You know what? It's funny. Dylan Brooks, I actually think his time in Houston probably didn't revamp his image as well as it should have. The Dylan the villain stuff. And I actually think he was pretty solid in Houston. I had interest in the Lakers looking to bring in Dylan Brooks because I think he could be helpful.
I thought he was really good for him last year.
I don't think Dylan Brooks makes a ton of sense for this team, in terms of maximizing him. To me, Dylan Brooks makes the most sense on a team that is much more ready to compete. I think Brooks was brought in, maybe not solely, but partially because you needed the money to work.
Yes.
I don't think he makes a ton of sense for this team.
I get scared a little bit here with him because it feels like also there's going to be there's too many shots available to him on this team, which could be a problem, as Memphis learned. And
I would not be surprised in the slightest if Dylan Brooks was flipped midseason. Because again, he does not make a ton of sense to me for this.
And by the way, they could get a first. They could get a late protected first for Dylan Brooks, or one of those crazy 5 or 6 second round pick type.
If he keeps playing the way he played in Houston, he has value for a team that has business thinking about the playoffs.
Dylan Brooks for Jonathan Kaminga.
That's interesting. That is interesting.
Let's talk about the Sacramento Kings. They're the team that got worse on accident, as they always do. They add Dennis Schroeder, Dario Saric, and Drew Eubanks. I'm like, why are we even saying those last two names? What's the point? They did draft Nick Clifford. We can have more of a Clifford conversation here in a second. They
I
lose
I
Jonas
can't. I
Valanciunas and
don't
Jake
know a thing
LaRavia.
about it. I can't.
My here's my thing with the Kings, and I don't want to spend a ton of time with them, but like, so Fox, the light the beam thing completely it collapses. It's gone. They still have
Just like 100
Sabonis.
years ago.
Yeah, they replaced De'Aaron Fox with Zach LaVine for some reason. The Sabonis LaVine duo is exactly what you think it is. It's awesome offensively, according to Cleaning the Glass, 115.2 offensive rating. That would have ranked 10th in the league last year. Awesome offensively. And as you probably guessed, horrible defensively. They had a defensive rating of 120.2 when those two guys shared the court in Sacramento last year. That would have been dead last in the league by a mile. Worse than Washington, worse than Brooklyn, worse than Utah, worse than these teams that were actively trying to lose. I don't know, frankly, how Sacramento gets out of the bottom 5 defensively this season. I don't see it. I literally don't see the pathway. It is a lot of Keon Ellis and Devin Carter and Nick Clifford just saving the defense, and Keegan Murray transforming into peak Kawhi Leonard defensively. Like,
Keon Ellis or Keegan Murray, one of them is going to, if not both, is going to have a nervous breakdown by the end of the season, just for all of the defensive responsibilities on their plates.
Right.
Like, I would be so angry, because Keegan Murray is in extension talks right now, or
I want to talk about that.
Maybe not in extension talks, depending on how things are going. I'd be so mad at the Kings with all the responsibilities I have in front of me. If I'm Keegan Murray, it's like, you're not going to extend me, really? Mm-hmm. Like, all this bleep I got to take care of, and you're not going to extend me? Like, that might feel more openly disrespectful than some stars not getting an extension. For what the asks are going to be.
And that's my biggest thing with Sacramento. Who are you building around? Because before I saw it, it was De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. We're going to build around that two-man game. And you could think about whatever you thought about the ceiling, whatever. But I knew, okay, you're building around those two guys. You have your 10-pole star that you drafted in De'Aaron Fox. You've traded multiple players that you didn't think were a fit with him because you loved them. And then you traded De'Aaron Fox. The moment he got unhappy, you traded him. And you still have Sabonis there, who's an awesome player, all-NBA caliber center. I get it, but he's 29. LaVine is 30. What's the path? Who are you building around? Keegan Murray, as you mentioned, is extension eligible. He's 25 years old, so a little bit older here for rookies, but or people, in his draft class. We'll see what he signs at what amount, because if they sign him something close to like $30 million, Josh Giddey got $25 million. I just want to remind people. So when you start thinking $30 million for Keegan Murray, he's better than Giddey. If they sign him to an extension around that $30 million number, that means that they probably believe in him in the future. Maybe I'm pretending too much, like the Sacramento Kings operate like a normal basketball operation, but I'll be interested to see if they sign him to an extension, and if so, at what amount. And even then, like, I don't know that Keegan Murray is that guy that you want to build the future for, and I think you have to spend a lot of this season figuring that out.
I was going to say, like, I really like Keegan Murray. I can see an argument for not extending him that really has less to do with Keegan Murray and more Sacramento, if they ever came to Jesus, recognizing, what the hell are we? Like, we're not, when you ask like for like building around, like, I don't know if they're building for anything. Like, I don't mean just the future. I mean the present. I mean the whatever. I can't figure out what it is they're trying to accomplish now or in the future. That idea of building around Domantas Sabonis, like, beyond the fact that he's 29 and chronologically behind any type of methodical, behind the curve for any type of methodical build, I don't know if there's a player in the league that I'm a bigger fan of what he can do and like respect his talent more and really think he's a very talented player, that I can figure out less how to build around than Sabonis. Mm-hmm. Like, I really don't know how you would do that. Like,
not how the Sacramento Kings did it. You would do it by getting a lot of guys who are like Keegan Murray. Unfortunately, they only have one Keegan Murray.
But even then, though, like, Sabonis as part of a defensive, like, just the defensive side of any build, he's super tricky. And even with all the things he does well offensively, and there's a lot of them, he can't space the floor at all. He really has no off-ball utility. Like, you really need the ball in his hands, which is fine. Like, He's a guy you'd want to put the ball in his hands, except there's like 4 or 5 other guys on this team who you really need to put the ball in their hands if you want to maximize them. Like, they're a roster that on so many levels does not make sense, whether you're trying to win now or whether you're even thinking 5 years ahead, 2 years ahead. Like, I just have no idea what they're doing.
Neither do I. I can't
I
figure
don't
it
think
out.
they
Like I
even
said,
got worse. I don't even think they got worse than last year. Like, in some ways, getting worse might give you more of a clue of what they're doing. They're basically the same level as last year.
Yep.
And for the life of me, I have no idea what they're doing.
I like Dennis Schroeder a lot as
So
an
do I.
international basketball player and everything that he's about. It does feel a little bit like what you're hearing coming out of Sacramento. It feels a little bit like they watched only Dennis Schroeder in Eurobasket and were wondering why not. Like, they're like, why isn't this guy getting the max? Like, how did we get this guy at such a steal? And didn't watch any of the NBA stuff on Schroeder.
I don't even know.
And he's another one of these guys, by the way, who needs the ball in his hands to be effective.
I was just going to say, I don't even know if it's that deep, like the idea of they only paid attention to him overseas and weren't watching the last few years of his NBA career. It just feels to me they're like, we like guys who need the ball in their hands. Dennis Schroeder needs the ball in his hands, so let's add him. Like, I think
we actually don't want him to do any of the Eurobasket stuff. We want more Detroit Pistons Dennis Schroeder. Like, that's what we need.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like they were like, we like having a roster filled with guys who need to have the ball, and we want as many of them as once. Dennis Schroeder's a free agent. Let's bring him in. And
by the way, none of them are Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with the ball in their hands, right? They're all just above average to good with the ball in their hands.
Yeah.
DeMar DeRozan is a really interesting trade candidate to me. This seems like a guy who kind of almost needs to get flipped this year. So he makes just under $25 million this year. He's making $25.7 next season, but only about $10 million of that is guaranteed. And so he's a really interesting trade candidate to me. I don't know where he makes sense. I honestly don't know if he makes sense anywhere, frankly, but maybe there's an injury, something like that happens, and in February he makes a little bit more sense somewhere else. I would be, if I'm Sacramento, trying to flip DeRozan at some point. I wonder what would happen if Keegan Murray doesn't sign an extension, if a team called about him and was like, we'll give you a decent young player who's a little bit younger. Maybe we'll give you, or maybe there's like an interesting first round pick that we can give you.
They should emphasize this young player needs the ball. They should emphasize this young player needs the ball in his hands. Like, if they really want to make sure Sacramento's interested.
You know what was really funny was the name I thought of initially was Jaden Ivey, and I'm like, yep, perfect.
Perfect.
He's just doing Ivy for Murray swap.
Chef's kiss.
There we go. All right, we hit a bunch of these topics that I gave you on the list, but let's go names only on this and like a quick elevator pitch. Most impactful newcomer. We talked about a bunch of them, but if you were to tell me who the most impactful one would be, who do you got?
DeAndre Ayton. And I realize this will sound Lakers centric, Lakers homerism, whatever. With the possible exception of, I guess, Jalen Green, I don't know if there's any newcomer on a team that has the opportunity to make as big of an impact as DeAndre Ayton across the league. Like, some of this is just there are only across the division. There's only a few players who I think actually are in a position to make this type of impact as Ayton. So to me, I think Ayton is going to have a pretty big impact, but I also think in some ways it's by process of elimination.
I don't think you're wrong. If I'm going to throw two more names in there, I think Dillon Brooks is actually going to have a pretty big impact on Phoenix, at least in the locker room. If you've ever been around Dillon Brooks, you know exactly what I'm talking. That guy makes his presence felt, and so in one way or another, he will make an impact on that Suns team. And then I think John Collins, potentially, as hazy as the Clippers situation might be.
I thought about Collins. I think, like we talked about earlier, it's going to be interesting to watch him just because he hasn't played significant basketball in a while. I just feel like that locker room is a bit stuffed for him to really have the type of impact that we're talking about. But I do like the addition for the Clippers.
I just think it gives them something they've never really had, which is a four with size, where before it was always Kawhi at the four, or Derek Jones Jr. when they went small, or Nick Batum or something like that. I think Collins probably starts. I think he adds a degree of spacing and stuff that I think could really be tapped into with James Harden in that pick and roll with Zubac. I'm really intrigued, and I've always been I still have a lot of my John Collins stock.
Well,
He's a South
Ty
Florida
Lue,
guy, so I appreciate him.
the reason I would not say he's going to start, or at least I think he shouldn't start, is Ty Lue has already said Bradley Beal's going to start. So
Mm.
between Beal and Harden, like you're already starting with a backcourt foundation that is going to be generously put defensively challenged. I don't know unless John Collins can really show something defensively that he hadn't in Utah because why bother? I feel like you need a little bit more of a defensive presence in that spot, but I could be wrong. I think they should play Beal off the bench. So clearly Lou and I are not on the same page with this anyway.
Might be a little bit of we're gonna start you, and then we're gonna decide it doesn't really work,
Maybe.
and then a month into the year, maybe you're not starting anymore. Season preview section. We're gonna rank the teams. We're gonna predict how many make the playoffs, and then we're gonna talk about which players we're gonna be discussing differently a year from now. We'll start there with the ranking. Let's rank these teams in the division 1 through 5. How you think they finish the regular season? You go first.
Lakers 1, Clippers 2, Warriors 3, Kings 4, Suns 5.
We almost agree completely. We agree on the top 3. I have Lakers, Clippers, Warriors. I think the Clippers have the best roster. I think they have way too many distractions. I'm not even really sure they have the best roster because I think they have more depth than the Lakers do. The Lakers still have Luka and LeBron, and the Clippers have Kawhi sometimes and James Harden all the time, but James Harden's not as good as Luka or LeBron. So,
What I would say is the biggest tiebreaker if you're looking, because I think the Lakers, Clippers, and Warriors will be relatively close to each other in terms of wins.
I think the Warriors are going to be probably 4 to 5 to 6 wins below them. But
okay, I mean it depends on. It's possible. It is actually certainly possible, and I am, like I said, lower on the Warriors than the consensus. I just think the West could be pretty bunched up, but it is certainly possible that there could be a gap between the Lakers and Clippers, gap Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I would put the Lakers over the Clippers and the Warriors is at the end of the day, if you're looking for things to break the tie, they're the one team that has one of their best players in his prime. And the Clippers and the Warriors, all of their best players are closer to the end of their career than the beginning, much less the prime.
To me, I think the Clippers win this division if Kawhi plays 60 to 65 games. That's the path, right? The Lakers win this division as long as Luka plays 60 to 65 games. And then you ask yourself which one of those two things are more likely, and obviously it's the Luka and the Lakers thing.
Yep.
So that's sort of what broke the tie for me. The Clipper, and then plus I talked to you about the distractions that I have. I still think maybe it doesn't submarine their season completely, but it might dock like 5 wins, like 3 to 5 wins or something, just dealing with the Kawhi thing. So that's that. The Warriors, we already talked about, don't really trust them to stay healthy. There's going to be a month where the Warriors look like the best team in the league. There always is. It happens every year. But I like to remind people there's also that month where they go like 5-10 and Jimmy Butler and Steph combined to play like 8 games in the entire month of January or something. And it's just like, and it's like the whole world is coming down in San Francisco. So that I have them as a pretty clear number 3. The place where we disagreed, you had the Kings and then the Suns. I have the Suns and then the Kings. I don't think it's worth debating it that much. I just think that the Kings are literally in the middle of.
Please don't ask me to.
They're like, to me, the Kings are they're face planting. They started the fall of the face plant at the trade deadline last season, but they haven't quite hit the sidewalk yet. And I think they're just about to hit the sidewalk. To the Suns, they still have Devin Booker, and I think he's just talented enough to make them better than the Kings, and that's about it. So that's the debate. How many teams do you think make the playoffs?
I'm going to say 3. I feel very good about the Lakers and Clippers making the playoffs. I feel very good about them both being top 6 seeds. I think the Warriors will end up making the playoffs as maybe a 6, more likely a 7 or an 8. I would not be shocked if they miss the playoffs, but I am reasonably confident they're going to make it in. I would be maybe not stunned if the Kings made the playoffs, but pretty damn surprised. I would be flat out jaw dropped if the Suns made the playoffs. Like Jordan Knott should win Coach of the Decade if they make the playoffs this year.
I would be floored if the Kings sniffed the play-in tournament. I I don't see it. I don't think they're going to be able to stop anybody. But we agree. I have three teams, and I agree with everything you said about the Lakers, the Clippers, and the Warriors. Warriors being the most sort of bubbly of those three. What player are we going to be discussing differently a year from now? I have 5 players on this list. We've already talked about DeAndre Ayton, so he was on the list. We don't have to talk about him more. I think we could be talking about Devin Booker potentially differently for good and bad reasons.
Yeah, I can see what you're talking about. I think that possibility is there, whether it's Devin Booker's ability to elevate an otherwise very, very flawed roster, or Devin Booker may not be much longer for the Suns.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when is Devin Booker going to ask out?
Yep.
But either way, it's a different conversation.
Yeah, and I see a world where Devin Booker, by the way, he's my early prediction. I'm not I haven't written this in pen anywhere, but scoring title for Devin Booker potentially here, as long as Jalen Green doesn't get in his way too much. Could he be back into like a top 15 kind of guy? Because he's sort of fallen out of that conversation. It's been a rough couple of years from him. No All NBAs, All Stars not there. Like, could he elevate himself back into that conversation where, off that finals run, we were talking about him as a top 10 player in the league, and he's really fallen off of that now to where we're not even thinking about him even in the fringe part of that conversation. He has all the talent in the world. He was right there not that long ago. Could he get back into that? I think it's possible for him with a really strong season. It doesn't sound like you and I expect it, but it's possible. Kawhi, I guess we're going to know more about what's going on there, so we're going to be talking about him differently in some way, shape, or form. Right?
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah.
But who did you have here? I'll leave my list here.
I've mentioned him a couple times, but I think there's a possibility with John Collins, just because he's a talented player who I think has become very overlooked across the league, just because, again, it's been so long since he's played basketball that people care about. But I think it's possible that on a team that matters, and also, like you said, on a team that has really needed his skill set and hasn't had that skill set in a while, I think it's possible that we could be talking differently about Collins. I thought about the possibility with Jalen Green, just because if the optimists about Jalen Green are correct, and in particular that he can be more of a well-rounded player, he is somebody that I think, to put it generously, is pretty polarizing among people who cover the league and fans and whatnot. So I think he pops to mind. I'm not necessarily banking on it, but in terms of thinking about players of a certain profile, I did think about him.
Yep, I think we're going to learn something about Jalen Green this year. We don't know what it is necessarily, but we're going to learn something. I think that's a great call. I have LeBron on my list. Again, more of an off-court thing, but we're going to be having a different kind of conversation a little bit next year. Either he's going to be retired, announced that he's going into his final year, maybe something there, or, I mean, on a new contract, potentially on a new team or going to a new team. It's just...
Yeah, I was thinking about this more on the court this season, but
that's really what the spirit of the question is.
Yeah. What you're saying is, I mean, there's clearly going to be a lot of intrigue about LeBron this offseason. There's no question.
Do you have anybody else on your list? Because I want to save my last one for
I don't actually.
We touched on so many of the players that could have been on this list, but here's my last one, and this is cheating because it's not a player, but Steve Kerr talked recently about an extension, and it sounds like he's not expecting it. It sounds like this is something that might be broached maybe later in the season or potentially even next summer, but he's in the last year of his contract with the Warriors. As a coaching free agent, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Depending on how this Warriors season goes, how much longer Steph plans to play, all of this stuff. If he go ahead.
I was going to say, I would think that he would want to play out the rest of his career for as long as Steph. How many more years does Kerr have if he doesn't get an extension?
I think you're right. It's as long as Steph plays.
Because if he's linked up with Steph and doesn't get an extension, I wasn't sure if he's in the final year.
He's in the final. No, I'm sorry. I misunderstood you. He's in the final year of his contract, Steve Kerr.
Yeah, I would think that, because Steph is only under contract for a couple more years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I would think that Steve Kerr would want to be there for the entirety of Steph's career. And I would think Steph would want that as well. And I would also really think that if Steph told the front office, I want Steve Kerr to be there for the rest of my career, they're going to say yes. I'd be very surprised if they, after everything they've been through with Steph, I would be very surprised if they would want to risk putting that type of sour context on the end of his career. I'd be very surprised.
Before I say anything else, as somebody who covered the Warriors and knows a little bit about this and what the idea initially was, I would also be extremely surprised if Steve Kerr and Steph Curry don't finish their careers together.
Yeah.
Or if at least Steve Kerr isn't the last coach that Steph Curry has, might be the better way to put that.
I'd be very surprised too.
That said, if he doesn't have a contract, he doesn't have a contract, and I think it's worth talking about. So again, with the footnote being, I would be very surprised if Steve Kerr was not coaching the Warriors next season, if this was the last season of him coaching the Warriors. That being said, he's Steve Kerr. He's one of the greatest coaches of all time, one of the most decorated coaches of all time, as respected as any coach in the league. As a coaching free agent, he has a lot of leverage and a lot of value. And I was thinking, what teams make sense for Steve Kerr that would actually go after Steve Kerr? And I came up with 3 teams-ish. The first one was the Clippers. Steve Kerr has a home in San Diego. He flies back to LA and San Diego and Southern California very often. If he were going to do the thing that all these other players are doing at the late stages of career, maybe that's something that he does. And the Lakers' position isn't coming open. The Clippers one probably isn't coming open. I think they like Ty Lue a lot. But if Steve Ballmer just says, I'm going to throw the bag at Steve Kerr, and by the way, doesn't matter. I don't have to circumvent any caps to get him because there's no limits to coaching.
What's the fun of that, though?
Yeah, that's true. We'll figure out another shell corporation. But in the meantime, I just thought, okay, worth being on the list. But I don't really think that would be one. The other one I thought of was the team that, when guys can't get to one of the LA teams, what's the team they go to? The Phoenix Suns. Close enough. But also Steve Kerr
Arizona ties.
A history, right, with the Phoenix Suns. If the Jordan Hot thing doesn't work out and Ishbia's patient wears thin very quickly, does he just say,
hold on.
Steve
I'm trying to wrap my head around that possibility. So
Exactly.
give me a second.
That's
Wes.
my point. Does he? Oh my God, Steve Kerr's available. Throw the bag at Steve Kerr. I could 100% see that happening. Now, could I see Steve Kerr being like, yeah, let me sign up for whatever that Phoenix Suns team is? I'm going to leave the Warriors for that? Yeah. Probably not. But if guys like Ishbia and Ballmer just throw loads of money at him, and for whatever reason Joe Lacob doesn't, which again would be surprising.
Well, here's the thing: as long as you mention the Clippers, it might really depend if by then we know how this thing is resolved. Because I can
100%.
promise you, Steve Kerr is not going to leave the Warriors to join a crippled Clippers franchise.
100% right. Here's the last team that was really interesting to me. I don't really think he would leave for the Clippers or the Suns. Would he leave for the San Antonio Spurs?
I knew you were going there.
If Mitch Johnson doesn't work out, or even if he does, it's not Steve Kerr. He's got a history with the organization, and then an opportunity for a second life of his coaching career. I just coached an all-time great with Steph, won multiple titles, and now I could do it with Victor Wembanyama. And
the complete opposite player of Steph. Like, yes. You can't find a more opposite player.
Which for a sicko coach is addictive.
I do think that would be interesting. I got to be honest. I kind of feel like if Steve Kerr leaves the Warriors, he likely takes a break from coaching and just resets. And, if we're talking about different organizations and regions that he has connections with, another connection is with Phil Jackson. And Phil Jackson often took these gap years and then came back. So, maybe that's something he learned from Phil, just the necessity sometimes of taking a year off or whatever and resetting. Again, I think the most probable scenario is they figure out a short new contract for Steve Kerr that lines up with Steph's career, signaling that those two are tied together, which I don't think either one of them would mind at all.
We agree. Thought it was an interesting thought exercise. Andy Kamenetzky, Locked On Lakers, ESPN LA. Thanks so much for jumping on, man.
Absolutely, man. This is fun.
Bram Hillsman is on the show with me now. You're the host of the popular Warriors Huddle podcast, and I wanted to bring you on for a few reasons. A, I just love talking to you. I love talking hoops with you. Love talking Warriors with you. And B, fascinating Warriors offseason. And I don't think that we're going to have time to really get into the meat of it when I do my Pacific division preview and I kind of look at the division as a whole. And I wanted to have you on to get the Warriors' perspective, the fans' perspective on just how crazy of an offseason this is. The Jonathan Kaminga stuff, weird media day. What was to you the most frustrating part of this offseason?
Oh my God. Well, first, let me say, appreciate you having me on. Always love talking to you too. And also appreciate you using the word fascinating. Although I don't mind telling you that as the host of a Warriors podcast, having to fucking talk about Jonathan Kaminga over and over and over again for what feels like 8 years wasn't really super fascinating, but glad to have it done now. Looking back on it, the thing that sticks out to me about this Jonathan Kaminga deal, and the portion that kind of frustrates me, and I wonder if we'll get into today, is I don't think there'll be a locker room issue. It sounded like media day went fine and that all the players kind of understood JK was just going after his bag, and that's allowed. The thing that frustrates me is that I think, let me start this in a different way. I think every offseason, there's an unofficial list of teams, Wes. That list isn't longer than like 3 or 4 people. And what the list is are the teams that veterans who are looking to rehab their career, either get a championship at the end or change the overall perception of their game and are willing to take less money to play for a team that'll give them that chance. I think this season, the Warriors were going to be a part of that. I genuinely believe they would have been in the list of teams who are going after the Marcus Smarts and the DeAndre Aytons, and the thing that frustrated me and that stuck out about this JK pursuit is that that's what it cost us. Like when those dudes were signing in other places, the Warriors had their hands tied because we had to finish, this back and forth with JK. And so I like the roster. I'm sure we'll get into it, but that's been the part that's been weird for me and kind of hard to accept.
I do want to get into the roster. We'll get into it in a second. 2 years, $48.5 million or whatever it was, $49 million for Jonathan Kaminga, team option on it. That was the big sticking point. Team option, player option, what's it going to be? Ends up being the team option. Kind of felt like it was going in this direction when Jonathan Kaminga's agent started going on podcasts and radio shows and saying, we're going to pick up, we'll do it. We'll pick up the qualifying offer. And ultimately they didn't. And they had to relent and just take up the team option there.
Absolutely right. That was my perspective as well. I mean, I'll tell you. So timeline goes, rewind it maybe 2 weeks ago. We're speeding towards this deadline. We know that there's an offer out there. JK hasn't responded. We haven't heard anything from Aaron Turner. And right around there is when Cam Thomas signed that qualifying offer in Brooklyn. And when that happened, Wes, I panicked. I was like, it's going to happen. Like, I guess the qualifying offer is a real thing. And like, we may lose this guy. And then when Aaron Turner, the agent, went on 1,000 shows, and every single show, you could almost tell time by him. He would say, and just in case you haven't heard, we'll 100% take that qualifying offer. Every time he said that, I started to believe it less and less, and then by the end of it, it's like, okay, you've talked me out of it. I do not think that this is a real deal. And it turns out we were right, because here we are. And not only did he give up the player option, but he didn't take the QO. So I guess it was all bullshit.
So he's eligible to get traded in January. And all the reporting around it is, hey, this deal is basically meant to get him through the year on a little bit of a better payment, obviously, a lot better of a payment than the QO. And then we'll figure it out. At that point, we'll figure it out. That said, is there a role for Jonathan Kaminga to play on this Warriors team?
I hope so. So let's see. I'll give you a incredibly optimistic take, and then I'll give you perhaps a more realistic take. Optimistic take. I hope. I mean, the one thing I thought the Warriors would not get during the offseason, like if you'd given me a multiple choice and I had to pick one word, like, well, this isn't going to happen. older would have been the thing I picked. I thought there's no way. And we did. We just welcomed in 39-year-old Al Horford. And so last year it was important that we have youth and athleticism. This year it's incredibly important. And so I hope optimistically that there's going to be a specific push by Kerr and the entire coaching staff to make sure there is a role for JK and he takes off, so that's my optimistic view. The maybe more realistic, slightly pessimistic, the go-to radio station here in the Bay Area is 95.7 The Game. They're the guys who broadcast the Warrior games. In fact, I think that you were on that channel a few times when you were still covering the Warriors here. Kerr was on there, I think it was about a month ago. And what he said kind of straightforward was, look, lineups that feature JK, Draymond, and Jimmy don't work. They don't really work. And unless Kerr can change his system or figure out a way where those three do work together, I think maybe the biggest value that Kaminga offers to the Warriors as a trade chip. And I think all the parties knew that. I mean, that's why that player option meant so much to both the agent and the team.
So Jimmy Butler is, to me, the ingredient that pushed Jonathan Kaminga out the door. And maybe we were already going in that direction, but I just don't see, considering that Draymond is in Sharpie, a part of the Golden State Warriors, right? You're not getting rid of Draymond. Okay. You could get away with lineups with Draymond and Kaminga. It's really hard to get away with lineups of Jonathan Kaminga, Draymond Green, and Jimmy Butler. So when you bring Jimmy Butler in, to me, that's the decision of two timelines, schmoosh timelines. We're gonna get Jimmy, who's very much on the Draymond, Steph Curry timeline, and we're gonna kind of end this two timeline facade once and for all.
Yeah,
and that felt like it could have been a clean break right at that point, and it's not because of everything that's going on here and the restricted free agency part of this too. But I look at it also in this way. I think I agree with Steve Kerr. Obviously, I think you look at the numbers, like it just doesn't work, right? Those lineups don't work. I don't know that they have to play those lineups all the time, because you also look at Jimmy Butler's injury history. He's played over the last 7 seasons 55, 60, 64, 57, 52, 58, and 55 games. This guy misses games. This guy misses 20 to 30 games a year. Now, bringing Kaminga at $20+ million a year to be backup Jimmy Butler isn't ideal, but if you could find bench units to play Kaminga with, figure out a way to stagger the rotations where he's only on the court with one of Jimmy or Draymond, I think he can work with one of them. I don't think he can work with both of them. I think the Al Horford ingredient here is really interesting to see how that opens things up for everybody, including Kaminga potentially. And then just assuming, okay, like Draymond's going to miss time because he's going to either get suspended or hurt. Jimmy's going to miss time because he's going to have these soft tissue injuries that just keep him out during the regular season. Steph at this point is missing time. Like there are going to be times where this Warriors team is going to need somebody to score. And as we saw in the playoffs, like Kaminga can get you points. Now, the other part of that is that the Warriors lost those games, but I don't know. I do think in an optimistic world, there is a place for Kaminga. I don't know.
I think you're not only right, I think what you are saying is going to be key to the Warriors season, even as you were saying it, right? So like the people they've added, all the major pieces on this team. In fact, here, let me say it as a rosy Warriors fan. I like this roster, Wes, more than I thought. And as a 16-game roster, I don't think that they're like title favorites, but can I squint and see a contender in, 4 7-game series? Sure. I like the experience. As an 82-game roster, I'm worried. Everyone they added, Horford's 39. D'Anthony Melton, if we say his name 3 times fast, his ACL snaps. Steph is getting older. There's just injury concerns across the board. So getting from game 1 of the regular season to game 1 of the playoffs, the more minutes that we can give to young guys like JK, the better chance they have at getting there. And so whatever combinations they can find, I think that's going to be clutch. And Horford makes it a little bit easier to put him in because, we lost Loon. I loved Kevon Looney. He's a lot of things. What he's not is a shooter. And so, adding Horford, who can shoot the 3 a little bit, may make it easier to put in JK. But we'll find out.
Well, let's talk about the roster a little bit. So they add Horford, DeAnthony Melton. So we've only signed his name twice now, so we're okay.
Yeah, I'm worried. I mean, really, we got to be super careful here. Also, thank you for not mentioning how terrible my camera is. I can barely tell who it is on the other side of this. I don't know if I've like smeared Vaseline on it or something, but this is not the look I was hoping for.
We've got Gary Payton II, Steph Curry. Did I miss anybody? That's really it that they've added.
That is it.
Three guards and a center, essentially.
Yeah, and a very happy JK, a motivated, bought in, totally different Jonathan Kaminga.
There's some lineups that they can get to. Horford at the 5. I think really they haven't had it. They've been looking, as you know, they've been looking for a center who can shoot threes forever. Essentially, since Steve Kerr got hired, they've been looking for that guy. And we can go through a litany of names where they tried and it failed and it didn't work. And guys, but now they've got Horford, they've got Quentin Post, who showed some things last year. There's some lineups that they can get to. These guys feel even more essential than they ever have, where Steve Kerr, I think, was always looking for a 5 who could shoot threes, because I think with like Durant and Steph and Clay, he was almost like, could we literally just break basketball and just see how far we could push this? Now it feels like we need this. Yeah. We need this to make the lineups work. And I think they'll work when Horford's available and on the court. Yeah. And if Quentin Post can make a little bit of a leap and play more like a center instead of a 7-foot guard. And those things are big ifs.
Yes.
And I think that's why you say when you squint and you can kind of see the outline of a team that can be a contender. I think that might be what you mean there.
That's exactly what I mean. I mean, what you'll hear if you talk to a Warriors fan who is stat forward and they're looking to talk you into the roster, what they'll tell you is that after we added Jimmy Butler, they went 23-7 down the stretch. They were the number 1 defensive team in the NBA, number 8 on offense, all of the type of numbers you'd like to see. And they added to that, and so we're ready to go. If you're looking for someone who's a little bit more jaded, and I happen to be both, I mean, all of those numbers are true, but the other portion of that is that the Warriors playoff season started with 2 months left in the regular season. Mm-hmm. The reason they went 23-7 is because they were desperate by the time they added Jimmy. Yeah. And I can tell you now, I mean, I think that it's not a secret that they do not want to have to play with that kind of urgency again. You can't have playoffs that last that long. And so there's reasons to think, okay, I can see it. I can see who they are, but there's also, causes for concern. I mean, we'll see where this thing goes there. And then, we haven't even mentioned it. The West is so loaded, Wes. And so, I mean, I think we got better, but I think that multiple teams around us also got better. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure how we fit in there. Do you mind if I ask you a question, man? Because I was worried about it. So one of the things we talked about on the Huddle was, what do we expect out of Jimmy Butler on media day? Is he going to come in a costume? Are we going to get emo Jimmy or like whatever it is? A portion of me thought he might dress up like Jonathan Kaminga just to fucking do it. And he didn't, right? Butler just showed up as Jimmy Butler. It was a straightforward appearance. You have had Jimmy Butler in your sporting life longer than I have. Good thing. Like, what does that mean? Like, should I be excited? Does that mean he's locked in? Does that mean he's bored? Like, what's going on? Is there anything I can pull out of that?
It means, I think it's a good thing. It means that he's not trying to do something that separates himself from the rest of the group.
Okay.
And I felt like for a couple of years there, Jimmy Butler was very much separated from the rest of the group in Miami to the point where he demanded a trade in the middle of the year. But it led to that. And I'm not saying because he had the dreadlocks, the emo Jimmy look or whatever is ultimately why he got to the trade. But if I was going to psychoanalyze somebody at the risk of doing it wrong, which I probably am, that's probably what was going on a little bit there. But look, Jimmy Butler, the first 2 years in Miami, like everything he said was straight out of the Heat Culture Handbook. Yeah. Like every buzzword, just in every single sentence, he was just exactly what you wanted to hear. He was basically reading Pat Riley's book verbatim to the media. And it was like, this guy gets it. He's so perfect Heat guy, all these things. And then by the end of it, it's soured as it always does with Jimmy Butler. For the record, I don't think the Warriors have any illusions of how the Jimmy Butler experience ends. They're very aware of his history. But they're also aware that part of that history, too, is Jimmy giving I think an honest effort the first couple of years to fit in and not fit out. And I think that's the part of Jimmy Butler that when you get that, you can potentially get something very special. The flip side of that is he's older, injury history is what it is, but he looked really good when he was on the court for the Warriors.
I can tell you that the only time I came close to being genuinely concerned about the Kaminga thing, because I thought that it would ultimately work itself out. But about, I don't know, last week, sometime late last week, there was reports that Jimmy Butler was starting to be like, wait, what's happening? And that maybe he was calling the team. The second that happened, I started panicking. It's like, we just whatever, pay Kaminga whatever the fuck he wants so that Jimmy doesn't start getting upset and this rift begins now.
I thought that was, we're all waiting. I forget who reported it, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus because I'm sure it was true. I do think it was overstated in the way that it got reacted to.
Yeah.
Because I think the really important part that got unsaid in all of that is that Jimmy Butler and Mike Dunleavy Jr. were literally teammates.
Yeah.
And they are like bros. So when Jimmy Butler calls Mike Dunleavy Jr. and it's like, what's going on with Kaminga? It's not like he's calling Bob Myers and saying, what's going on with Kaminga? Let me get involved. He's calling his old teammate. And it might have been a completely different conversation that kind of ended up broaching on the topic of Jonathan Kaminga. So I thought that was way overstated. But to your point, as a Heat guy, I was like, oh, here we go.
I am sure. Yeah, we were a little concerned. I'll just leave it that way. Also, I'd appreciate if you didn't say the word Bob and Myers together. We try to avoid that here in Golden State. I mean, unless you can tell me that his kids work for ESPN, because I was told fucking Bob Myers wanted to spend more time with his family and his children, and that's why he was leaving Golden State. And I don't know. I don't know if his kid like holds the lights for him or something, but that seems to be total BS at this stage.
I'm sure his my light just dropped. That's the sound you just heard. I'm sure the ESPN job is just as hard as the Warriors GM job. Last thing here, Bram. I don't want to keep you too long on this. I want to ask you, who's the player you're most interested in? And I'm leaving that purposely vague and open-ended so that you can have as much fun with it as possible. So who's the player you're most interested in? I'm going to ask you that, and then I'm going to ask you what you think the real ceiling of this team is. But tell me who's the most interesting player to you is.
I'll give you a stupid answer. Steph.
Stupid.
Yeah, well, Steph's entering this portion of his career now where Warrior fans recognize that we might never have this again. You know, that like every play, every incredible turnaround three, all of these things need to really be appreciated because we're going to blink and it's going to be gone forever. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the person I'm most interested in like basking in their greatness, Steph. As an aside, not an aside, as a good continuation of that, I'm really interested that Seth joined. I like the Splash Brothers jokes that we're going to start to be able to make. I'm sure that they'll be everywhere. I like that he's adding a shooter. I like that they've always kind of been competitive, and now that they're going to be on the same roster, so I'm interested in him. And then, I mean, let's use a name we've already been throwing around, Kaminga. If the Warriors are suddenly going to jump the line of contenders, if you and I, the next time we talk, let's say it's in February, and out of nowhere, Golden State is towards the top of the standings in a way that we didn't anticipate, the reason for that won't be Steph. We think Steph is Steph. It's not going to be, I mean, maybe we'll be surprised by Horford's health, but if he's really helping, that's not going to be a giant jump. What will have happened is Kaminga has made this leap, you know, and so I'm not expecting it. I wouldn't bet on it, but am I interested in watching it? Absolutely. The ultimate upside of this team, I was just looking at the overs and unders. I think the Warriors number was 46.5 for Vegas the last time I looked at it, as far as regular season wins. I take the over on that. I view them as a very dangerous 5 or 6 seed. I think that we will avoid the play-in. I think that anybody who plays us will likely be favored in the playoffs, but no one's going to be happy to see us. If you're a fan of the opposing team, you're not doing a fist pump when it's us that you have to play. And I mean, who knows how everything fits together, right? But if they made it to the second round and had a completely healthy team, I would consider it a successful season. If we had a shot, 7-game series, everybody's healthy, we're in the second round. That's what I'd like to see again, because it got stolen from us last year.
I want to touch on Steph because I think you're right to call him the most interesting player, and I don't think that's boring. And I actually think it's the right answer, and it's probably way overlooked. To your point, right? We can't take this kind of thing for granted anymore. But before I do that, Kaminga, trade eligible in January. Talked about it a little bit before, but that to me is the big swing piece.
Yeah,
is
sure.
if in January Kaminga has played well enough, and that salary is big enough, plus another salary that maybe they acquired over the summer that already exists on the roster. Can they actually go upgrade at a major spot?
Right.
Can they get another wing? Could they get a center who's not 39 years old and can help them? Can they get something else? Can they dramatically upgrade the Podziemski, Buddy Hield, Moses Moody spot in the lineup? I don't know, but that to me would be really interesting. And if they can get the right piece, then you might be looking at a scenario where like, oh, wait a minute. All of a sudden, everything sort of clicks together in a way it didn't really before. And maybe this is the guy who can kind of bridge us into that next whatever and kind of helps us with some of these matchups in the West. So that's one thing, and that's why I think it's interesting. But you're right about the Steph piece. And here's what I always say about Steph and LeBron and any of these guys now. It's not about accomplishments for them anymore. It's about moments. That's all anybody wants. Nobody's asking LeBron or Steph to win another championship. Except for like ESPN talking heads and that kind of thing, where it's like, can they win the championship? Okay, whatever. Nobody's really asking for them to win a championship. Their legacies are what their legacies are. If you're a Michael Jordan guy, another LeBron ring isn't going to change your mind. Right? Steph is where he is. He's got the 2 bookend championships around Kevin Durant. He doesn't need another one. It doesn't change where he is in the all-time rankings. Maybe a 1-2 spots in your list, but really what we're talking about, not material.
Yep.
The only thing anybody wants from these guys anymore, be competitive, get in the playoffs, don't get swept. Give me a moment. LeBron, those moments in the playoffs where you look like you're 28 again and it's just crazy, that's what we want. Steph, the turnaround threes, the shimmy, the nights. Just give me one. Just give me one. Yep. I just need one of those and I can go to bed happy, right? Yep. Yes. And that's all it is. That's all it is. And that's why he's the most interesting guy, because you're absolutely right. We can't take it for granted. And I'm rooting for those moments constantly.
Yeah. And I mean, a reminder to anyone listening, because we do tend to get used to excellence in a sporting setting, especially someone who's kept up the excellence for as long as people like LeBron and Steph has. It's not going to last forever. We can already see kind of the end. And so just make sure, tune in occasionally, soak it up while you can. I hate to admit this, but I'm old enough to have watched Jordan when he was still actively playing. And I can tell you that, I guess I was probably too young to really appreciate it, but you didn't, in like 95, 96, like as he was accumulating all of this greatness, I did take it for granted. I wasn't considering that I was watching history. And when he retired, it seemed abrupt. I wanted another 2 months to be like, no, wait a minute. I'm supposed to really sit in this and enjoy it. And so I am doing now what I wish someone had done for me for Jordan. This is the bat signal. Get out there, appreciate this, because it's going to be gone. And when it is, nobody else is going to do what he's been doing.
Thanks so much for jumping on, man. Appreciate it.
Missed you.